Should we start?
Yeah.
Okay. Bueno, muchas gracias nuevamente por acompañarnos en el ciclo de conferencias de la Cátedra José Gaos 2023. El día de hoy tenemos la conferencia de clausura del profesor Franz, a quien hemos tenido el gusto de tener con nosotros durante pues, ya 3 semanas. Y bueno, y el día de hoy su conferencia se titula Cognitive Synonymy de Parrot. Y bueno, muchas gracias, Franz.
Thanks. So this is the last talk. So I think I need to say something. So when I started 3 weeks ago, I was honored and happy to be here, and now I'm very honored and supremely happy that I've been here because I mean, I got comments, questions, criticisms from you, and I've been in the middle of great philosophical conversations all the time, and you gave me lots of things to think about concerning my research, what I could do better, what I need to improve, things that I need to work on more, and basically you gave me a research agenda for months, if not years to come, and when it's about getting philosophical feedback, that's as good as it gets. So thanks a lot, folks. And I also want to thank everybody for the organization because that's been totally spotless. I'd like to have a special clap for Aurelie in particular because she organized the whole thing. And she was a machine. I mean, if she wasn't a good philosopher, she's wasted for philosophy. You should be CEO at Google or something. So thanks again. That was great. So last talk is going to be long and complicated and convoluted and difficult because I'm tracking a very elusive notion. The notion of cognitive synonymy. It's so messy that it's not even clear that that's a coherent concept. We will see that it's subject to a jumble of apparently conflicting intuitive desiderata. It's hard to make sense of. And there are some results that seem to show that it's even impossible to make sense of the notion, but I think it's very important. That's my most recent stuff involving topics and subject matters. It's stuff you don't find in the book. In the topics of thought book. But I got the idea that at some point that one could also use topics to shed light on, let's say, a notion of content, which is sensitive to human cognition, cognitive capacities, and also cognitive limitations. Okay. So it's going to be complicated, but you will be familiar with a number of things because I've been bothering you with these ideas for 3 weeks now. So when I start talking about topics and subject matters and so on, you should feel moderately at home. And anyway, in the middle, we got the Monty Python stuff, which should lighten up the atmosphere a little bit. So that was your assignment for today. Okay, yesterday I said, go watch the Monty Python Dead Parrot sketch. Okay, that's going to be very important. Okay, so this is joint work with 11 Polisher, who did the Master of Logic and then the PhD at the ILC in Amsterdam, and who now works at the Munich Center for Mathematical Philosophy. Okay, he was bred by Hannes Leitgeb, and now he's part of the Leitgeb Mafia there. Good. So first of all, why the idea of a notion of content which is sensitive to cognition is important. I'm tracking in particular the notion of cognitive synonymy. And I'll tell you something on what this is or how to understand it at the outset. And I'll tell you something on why I think it's important, even though it's a very loose notion. So it's something like this. Sentences phi and psi are cognitive synonyms for one when they play the same role in one's cognitive life. That's an idea that you can unpack in a number of ways, and to which I shall return repeatedly in the talk. You can unpack it in terms of equivalence. That's an idea that you even find in Frege. And one cannot take either as true without taking the other as true, or what one thinks about giving either one does given the other. Or you can spell it out in terms of understanding. What one understands when either is uttered, one does when the other one is. Or in inferential terms, whatever one concludes, deductively, abductively, inductively, supposing either, one does supposing the other. Or in terms of belief update, whatever belief change would be triggered by learning either, would also be triggered by learning the other. So the idea is phi and psi are interchangeable insofar as the cognitive life of the person is concerned. Okay, one plays the same role as the other when it's about belief, revision, understanding, making inferences, and so on. You may take cognitive synonymy as a kind of two-way cognitive entailment. And the idea, again, roughly is something like phi cognitively entails psi when supposing phi, one concludes psi, upon learning phi, one would come to believe psi, and so on and so forth. All of this is for one. Okay? Cognitive synonymy is relative to a speaker and thinker. Even it can be generalized to groups of thinkers and also to people who share a language. Okay, so I don't know. Ex falso quod libet is classically valid, and pseudo Scotus law is classically valid. They're going to be cognitive synonyms for most people who know about logic. Okay, John is a bachelor. John is an unmarried man. They're going to be cognitive synonyms for most competent speakers of English. Okay, that's kind of the view. So why it matters? Well, there's something in this ballpark in linguistics, because lots of textbooks of linguistic semantics will tell you that there's a notion of absolute synonymy. Okay, that's the usual one. Substitutivity salva veritate in all contexts. But then they're going to say, well, that's a limit notion. It's a merely theoretical notion because you're never going to be able to test all contexts. Okay, that's an ideal. And often these people take as their working concept a more modest notion of synonymy, which they call cognitive synonymy, which is supposed to be sensitive to the cognitive capacities of speakers. It's an idea that defining psychology. I told you occasionally about framing effects, so how people can have different attitudes, okay, different cognitive attitudes towards sentences which are necessarily equivalents. So some necessary equivalents make one believe and choose differently, right? So I can tell to somebody, you have 40% chances of success if you apply for the job, and they will believe certain things and act accordingly. If I tell them you have 60% chances of failing if you apply for the job, they're going to believe different things and act in a different way. But the two sentences are necessarily equivalent. Okay, they have to go to the same possible words. But then we may wonder, well, there must be some pairs of sentences that don't make one believe or act differently. Okay, those are the ones which are cognitive synonyms for an image. They also may matter for philosophers, because we know that UCLA propositions, that's just another way to call propositions as sets of possible words. Sometimes they're called UCLA proposition because they're due to people who work there at the time, right? They give the usual Boolean algebra, right? If you take propositions as sets of possible words, you got the usual simple Boolean algebra. So conjunction is intersection, disjunction is the union, negation is the complement, so on. But that clashes, I mentioned that several times, with what Steve Diablo has called our sense of when sentences say the same thing. Equilateral triangles are equiangular, 7 plus 5 equals 12. They are co-intentional to the same possible worlds, but they seem to say different things because only one is about triangles and they make people by how their angles are. That's also the notion that delivers logical omniscience. We talked about that. And that doesn't apply to ordinary agents who are not logically omniscient. So take Joe Bloggs, it's an ordinary guy. He can have different attitudes towards necessarily equivalent claims, but Joe will have the same attitudes towards phi and psi when they play the same role in Joe's cognitive life. Okay? So there are reasons for investigating a notion of synonymy, which is sensitive to cognitive agents, mental states, and limitations. Arguably, that's going to be more fine-grained than the notion of synonymy that you get in standard possible world semantics, right? Where it is just co-intentionality. So it's going to be hyper-intentional. And when you go hyper-intentional, that's another issue that we addressed several times. You are as well. Just how hyper is the hyper-intention supposed to be? How fine-grained is that supposed to be? If it's going to be more fine-grained than the usual Boolean algebra that you get when you take the contents of sentences as just sets of possible words, what kind of algebra is that going to be? If it's going to be an algebra, okay? And how fine-grained is that supposed to be? And when we consider the notion of cognitive synonymy, we are pulled in opposite directions. There's a jumble of conflicting intuitions that we may want to account for, and it's hard to account for all of them together. Surely we don't want to get as fine-grained as the syntax of the language, right? We don't want it to be the case that whenever we have two syntactically distinct sentences, then they can never be cognitive synonyms. We don't want to be so fine-grained. But that's what you get when you allow contents to be sets of possible and impossible worlds, and you have very anarchic impossible worlds. Okay, I work on impossible worlds. I like that stuff, but one must be careful not to overdo it. Okay, in particular, certain impossible worlds which are called open. I think the terminology is due to Bryan, originally. These are words which are not closed under any non-trivial notion of logical consequence. Okay? They can make through a conjunction without making through either of the two conjuncts. Okay, they can make through P or Q without making through P or without making through Q. They can be completely crazy. And some people are proposed to understand to get very fine-grained contents as sets of possible and impossible worlds, including impossible worlds of this kind. But that gets an individuation of content which is way too fine-grained, even for fans of the approach like me. For instance, if our Joe is located at rule of W, suppose that set S sub W is the set of open worlds accessible by some relation of accessibility, which is naturally understood epistemically here. So they're just epistemic possibilities for the agent. And if you take this C as the set of formulas which are true at all of those worlds, well, then it turns out that Joe knows or believes or has some other cognitive attitude towards the content that phi at the world, just in case phi is in C. But C is just a set of formulas. It doesn't have any non-trivial closure properties. Okay, so the whole possible worlds apparatus drops out. The whole world, sorry, apparatus drops out. It's idle. You could as well say, well, the cognitive package of Joe is just a set of formula. So you just do the syntax. You don't even need the semantics. So that's pretty much. On the other hand, one may say, well, even for a fine-grained and cognitively sensible account of content, it should be that, and now I'm using these brackets to target the putative notion of content, the content assigned to phi, whatever it is. It should be that phi and phi, well, they express the same content. And that phi and psi and phi, they express the same content. If you are after cognitive synonymy for one who understands ordinary conjunction, okay, of the order insensitive kind. That's one consideration for at least some coarse graining that you may have. Sure, sometimes order matters in conjunction. So if Mary says, Lucy is a lawyer and an expert chess player, and John says, no, Lucy is an expert chess player and a lawyer. Well, yeah, that's fine, but probably we make sense of this pragmatically, not as having to do with content. Probably John just wanted to imply that playing chess is what matters for Lucy. Okay. So we resort to pragmatics because we feel the two appearances say the same thing, and we believe that's all for John too. At least when and doesn't clearly encode any ordering. It's different when you have an and that does encode an ordering. Like Mary went to the hospital and got sick. Mary got sick and went to the hospital. In that case, that's an and that encodes an important temporal ordering, right? But that's not the case here. On the other hand, you may have motivations for very fine-graining cognitive contents here. Take some, well, first some more coarse graining and then fine-graining. More motivations for coarse graining. Take even some putatively very anarchic mental state, such as imagining people say that imagination is anarchic in ways belief is not. For instance, because it is subject to voluntary control, right? So I can imagine that all of Mexico City has been painted pink, but I cannot make myself believe that out of an act of my will, right? Because I have overwhelming evidence of the contrary. And that's why people, for instance, think, that's one of the reasons people think that the cognitive state of imagining that something is the case is very anarchic. But try to imagine that Paul is tall and thin without imagining that he's thin at all. That seems hard to do. On the other hand, fine-graining considerations. Surely Joe can believe, one may say, that phi and psi without believing that phi, because he's on occasion cognitively incapacitated. Maybe Joe needs to perform some inference to move from believing one to believing the other. So he needs to do something. And he may fail to do something because, I don't know, he's distracted or drunk or whatever. So inference, quasi-psychological process, happens in time. And then one could always get distracted and fail, even while applying a basic inference rule like conjunction elimination. So I may say, well, maybe we do need crazy impossible worlds to model very fine content sensitive to the cognitive limitations of ordinary agents. So there are all of these conflicting considerations. I think that's too fast. For instance, there's a very well established distinction in formal epistemology and epistemic logic between pure and deductive closure principles for attitudes like knowledge or belief or supposition. And simplification or conjunction elimination, for instance, for knowledge, so the principle according to which if one knows that phi and psi, then one knows that phi, that's usually labeled as a pure closure principle. For instance, that's terminology from Wes Holiday. And what's the difference? Well, a deductive closure principle from certain premises phi 1, phi 2, and so on, down to phi and to psi, has it that if an agent comes to believe psi, starting from phi 1 and so on, by competent deduction, all the while knowing each of phi 1 and so on, then the agent knows psi. That's a way in which epistemic closure is sometimes formulated. And of course, that can go wrong for ordinary people like Joe. He may just be unable to make the inference. But very often people say that simplification, conjunction elimination, qua pure principle is such, Wes Holiday says, that an agent cannot know phi and psi without knowing psi, regardless of whether the agent came to believe phi by competent deduction from psi and psi. Tim Williamson says that much, and I agree for once. So that's knowledge and its limits, and Williamson says knowledge of a conjunction is already knowledge of its conjuncts. There's no deductive move for the agent to do it. It's already all there. He says there's no obstacle here to the idea that knowing a conjunction constitutes knowing its conjuncts. Just as in mathematics, we may count the proof of a conjunction as a proof of its conjuncts, so that if P and Q is proved, then P is proved, not just provable. Okay. So, can we get some algebra of intermediate fine-grained, so not too fine-grained, like you would get if you have open possible worlds, but more fine-grained than the usual Boolean algebra of possible semantics? Well, one may try things more fine-grained than classical possible worlds, but which, unlike open impossible worlds, still display some logical closure properties, like the situations of Barbois and Perry. Okay, those are not maximal, right? So they don't take a stance on any P. Situations in the Barbois-Perry sense may support neither P nor not P. They are smaller. Okay. But still they have some logical closure properties. And situations of situation semantics a la Barbois and Perry have been used to make sense of the point of evaluation of first degree entailment. You may have heard about this. That's a weak paraconsistent logic. It's a four-valued logic, and the four truth values are true, false, both true and false, neither true nor false. Okay, and you can have a word semantics for that logic. It's very simple, except that you may not want to call those things possible words, because there are points in the semantics where a contradiction can be true, or where excluding middle can fail. So they can make it both P and not P. They can make to neither P nor not P, but they still have some logical closure properties, okay? Like they are adjunctive, so if they make through P, they make through Q, they also make through P and Q. They are prime, so when they make through P or Q, they're gonna make through P or they're gonna make through Q. So they still satisfy some logical closure properties, even though they're not like maximally consistent possible words. And that setting gives you another kind of algebra. It gives you the Morgan algebra, okay, which is more fine-grained than the Boolean algebra. It's a bounded distributive lattice. Right? Negation is just an involution operation that satisfies the De Morgan's law. That's why they sometimes call it the Morgan negation. Is that good for cognitive synonymy? Well, that helps because in this setting, if you take contents as sets of these worlds, FD worlds, you get that phi gets the same content as phi and phi, conjunction commutes, phi and psi will entail phi and psi taken separately, so conjunction elimination works. Perhaps more controversially, not phi and phi get the same content, but it seems to be going better. And that setting has been used, as a matter of fact, to model logically inconsistent but non-trivial and incomplete belief states. So it's used to model believers who are cognitively more realistic than the logically omniscient agents of standard kinetic and epistemic logic. Okay? And that's been around since the 80s. But here's the big problem. First degree entailment assigns the same content to phi and phi of psi, and also to phi or phi and psi. These are just the so-called absorption principles. Okay, but that's wrong if you're after cognitive synonymy, because cognitive synonymy should be sensitive to the conceptual limitations of ordinary agents. It's not just that John is happy and either he's happy or extremely disconnectedness is no hereditary property of this. And I don't quite seem to say the same thing, right? It's also that our friend John may laugh. Joe Blogs. Yeah, that's the Brits use Joe Blogs to mean ordinary nouns. Is that right? Yeah. Joe may lack the concept of extremely disconnectedness. Now, when you lack the concepts which are necessary to grasp a certain propositional content, you can't have any attitude towards that content. You cannot suppose, believe, know, whatever that phi when you lack some concept needed to grasp what phi is about. Okay. In that sense, first degree entailment is not good for cognitive synonymy. But now the absorption law, so A equals A, well, if you want to talk algebraically, you can say join and meet. Okay, A equals A meet A join B and so on. They are very weak algebraic identities. So they hold in any lattice, including non-distributive and non-modular. So lattices which are even less structured than the Morgan algebra. Okay, so that tells you that finding the right level of fine-grainness for an algebra of cognitive synonyms is not going to be easy at all. I think one take-home message so far is that cognitive synonymy should respect topic or subject matter in the intuitive sense of what the content expressed by a sentence is about. We talked about this already at length. Phi and psi can claim to be cognitive synonyms for one, even though they entail each other in classical logic or in weaker logics like first degree entailment or so, because one lacks the concepts needed to grasp what either of the two assigned content is about. Example, that's taken from Salmaker and Inquiry. Okay. William III may have known or believed or supposed or whatever that England could avoid war with France without thereby knowing or believing and so on that England could avoid war with France or France could develop a nuclear arsenal. Okay, even though that's just one basic inferential step away. Why? Because he had no idea what nuclear weapons might be. Now, conceptual limitation, I used all intentionally because that shows that conceptual limitations of ordinary agents force an asymmetry between conjunction and disjunction. Simplification may well hold for cognitive entailment, but addition of disjunction introduction from phi to phi of psi in general shouldn't. And I already mentioned to you, if you remember in past talks, well, that's that's a mark of topic sensitive or subject matter sensitive kinds of content. Remember that asymmetry between conjunction and disjunction, quotation from Fine and Gum and so on. And again, even Williamson is on board. Amazing. So he says again, that's knowledge and its limits. Conjunction elimination as a special status, it may be brought out by a comparison with the equally canonical disjunction introduction inference to the disjunction P or Q from the disjunct P or from the disjunct Q. Although the validity of disjunction introduction is closely tied to the meaning of disjunction, a perfect logician, and that would be one who has no computational limitations, okay, who knows P may lack the empirical concepts to grasp, understand the other disjunct Q. Since knowing a proposition involves grasping it, and grasping a complex proposition involves grasping its constituents, such a logician is in no position to grasp P or Q, and therefore does not know P or Q. In contrast, those who know a conjunction grasp its conjuncts because they got the conjunction. I think it's totally right. Okay. So how do we model sensitivity to subject matters? Here's another attempt. Kit Fine. I told you about Kit Fine's sort of maker semantics and the logic, which is he built on that, which is called angelic content logic. That's because he retrieved old work by a logician called Angel. Cool stuff. So that kind of logic / semantics as a set of states, which look a bit like Barbara's Paris situations. They're partial. They also resemble FDE worlds because they can be inconsistent. So Kit Fine allows inconsistent states because there's a fusion operation of states, and one can merge incompatible states. So if you have the state of this chair being blue all over and the state of this chair being red all over, you fuse them together and you have the state of this chair being red and blue all over, which is a metaphysical impossibility. Okay? He has a kind of impossible states, metaphysical impossible states. So we may take angelic content equivalence of UA entailment in the Kit Fine logic as a candidate for cognitive synonymy. It has all the good features of first degree entailment. Phi and psi still equivalent to psi and phi, it maintains phi, but because Kit Fine gives the truth and falsity conditions differently from FDE, he follows an old approach by Van Frassen. Angelic content logic invalidates exactly the unwelcome absorption principles. Phi is not equivalent to phi and phi of psi, or to phi or phi and psi in the Kit Fine setting. Okay. That's actually the one difference between FDE equivalence and angelic content equivalence. So it invalidates exactly what we didn't like. Good. But now things get worse, and that's where the Monty Python thing comes in. There's a very general problem for all the accounts we've seen so far. Possible worlds, crazy open worlds, Kit Fine, state semantics, first degree entailment, anything. It's very general and difficult to handle, and that's where the sketch comes in. And so I think so. Michael Parling has sold the Parrot to John Cleese. By the way, he was a rector at St. Andrews at some point. I mean, rector doesn't mean the boss of the university. The rector is the one who takes care of student well-being, is the student representative among the high schools. He was our rector in the 70s. He did a good job because he was already super famous. So they thought, I wouldn't know around, but they thought he would never show up, but he did show up very often. He did a good job. Anyway, he got this Parrot sold. Parrot is dead. But Michael Parling told him that the Parrot was alive and just sleeping. So he goes back and he's not happy. And he tries to persuade Michael Parling that the Parrot is dead. Okay. And he uses all the available evidence, but Parling is just in denial. Passing the Parrot and so on. And at some point, he loses it. Okay? And he comes up with a sequence of claims. Okay. So why that creates a problem? So all the accounts we've met so far have this much in common. They partition the sets of sentences of the relevant language into equivalence classes, more or less fine-grained. Okay, they all do that. Phi and psi end up in the same box when they are assigned the same content, right? So that's all. They all partition. Okay, and partitions come with equivalence relations, right? So it's got to be symmetric, reflexive, and transitive. Now, when you're after cognitive synonymy, Reflexivity is fine, because surely phi will play the same role as itself, at least for a sentence type, in one's cognitive life. So that's fine. And probably symmetry is fine. If phi is cognitively equivalent with psi, then psi will be cognitively equivalent with phi. The problem is transitivity. Because there's some intuitive fuzziness in what is cognitively equivalent to what to someone, and that's the sequence of claims from the Monty Python that viruses. But that's don't easy, so to say. It acted on. This product is no more. Yeah, it ceased to be. It seems it's expired and gone to meet its nature. The rest of life, it rests in peace. Its metabolic processes are now history. It's kicked the bucket. It's shot off its mortal course, ran down the curtain and joined the crowd invisible. This is an ex-product. So, now what you may take the first item in the series, this product is passed on, as immediately entailing the next one, cognitive speed. This product is no more, or as equivalent to it. And similarly for each other adjacent pair. But you may have trouble when looking at the first and last item. You say, well, maybe those are not cognitive synonyms. Now you may not like the example, I only used it because it's funny, but that gives you a recipe to build putative counterexamples to transitivity, and surely the recipe has good instances. So in general, it works like that. Take a sequence of sentences, phi 1, phi 2, and so on, phi n, where any adjacent phi I obviously entails, cognitively speaking, the next one, phi j, or that you are equivalent for one. But the first item in the series and the last one in the series are not. Right? For instance, so that's a point made by Bryan and Franz in a nice paper that came out in Field Quarterly, where they raise a transitivity challenge for any hyperintentional, cognitively sensible account of content. Okay. For instance, they have the sequence phi 1 to phi n as a sequence of equations, where each neighboring pair makes for a trivial transformation, but the transformation between the initial one and the final one is not trivial in the least. Or they say, take a sequence of two-way entailments, you move to the next item by an elementary rule application, so it's cognitively very easy to get there. But when you chain them all together and you look at the first and the last one, well, that's supremely non-trivial, right? And long proofs are like that, like natural deduction. Each step is stupid, but when you chain them all together, well, then you can have a very complicated and long proof, right? So, cognitive synonymy of two-way cognitive entailment seems to be intransitive. Well, there are reasons to believe that it's intransitive. But then it starts looking more like similarity than like synonymy. Similarity is reflexive and symmetric, but not transitive, at least when it's not exactly similarity. Then identity of meaning. You may even doubt that it's appropriate to call it synonymy, okay, if it's only similarity. And actually, some people have even claimed that of meaning in general. There's all work by Goodman and then Besmates and then Churchland. These are people who say, oh, you can never properly say that two distinct sentences have the same meaning. Okay. They can have more or less similar meanings. Okay. It's a controversial view. There's objections to them. And it's not even certain that it's a coherent idea, the idea of meaning similarity. There's all the objections by Fodor and Lepore. There's a big debate with Churchland back in the 90s and so on. But I think the most striking problem has been raised by Hannes. So he came up with a little paper which got way less attention than it should have had. And in that paper, Hannes shows that there's a bunch of plausible assumptions that govern content similarity, which is inconsistent, gives you a contradiction. So these are the assumptions that he makes. Take a language, form a language with a similarity relation. And the assumptions are, well, the relation is reflexive and symmetric, well, of course, because that's a similarity relation. Connectedness, the relation is connected, that means take any two sentences of the language, find psi. However, dissimilar, they're going to be linked by some perhaps very long similarity change. So there's always going to be a sequence of like phi 1 is similar to phi 2, which is similar to blah, 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 down to phi n. Okay. These two may be very, very dissimilar from each other, but they must be linked by some possibly very long similarity chain. No triviality, no tautology in the language can be similar to a contradiction, which makes sense, otherwise anything could be similar to anything. Closure, the sentences in the language are closed under the truth function operations of negation, conjunction, and disjunction. And compositionality for similarity, that's possibly the most important one for our purposes. Similarity of the language is composition in the following sense. If I and psi are similar, then also not phi and not psi are going to be similar. And if phi and psi are similar and chi and theta are similar, then also phi and chi is going to be similar to psi and theta, and phi or chi is going to be similar to psi and theta. That's just compositionality rephrased for meaning similarity, right? Yeah. So I have a whole slide on why each one of the assumptions is plausible, but I'm going to cut it short. We come back to this if you have doubts. And that's a proof taken from Hannes's paper, that all of those together lead to a contradiction. So Hannes concludes, he shows that either the very idea of meaning similarity is doomed, or he says our common views on compositionality have to be changed significantly in order to make compositionality compatible with semantic resemblance. Good. So if the notion is non-compositional, it's going to be very messy to model, right? It's even worse because one can come up with arguments for transitivity and try to explain away that Parrot sequence intuitions. We have three arguments. I think I'll only give you the first and the third, otherwise, it's going to be taking a long time to get to the end. So now I'm going to use some formal notation. I'm going to use this squidgy double arrow for cognitive synonymy. So that means, so phi squidgy double arrow psi means phi and psi cognitive synonyms. And I'm going to use this squidgy single arrow for cognitive entailments. So that means phi cognitive entailments. You may say, well, maybe we're not after sameness of content. We may follow Quine. You know, Quine hated the idea that you assign propositional contents to sentences because he hated propositions, right? And he wanted to characterize these notions just by talking about substitutivity, salva veritate. So you may go for a Quinean approach like this. Phi and psi are cognitive synonyms if and only if, for all allowed sentential contexts, chi, you can replace one with the other. So we have phi in context chi if and only if psi in context chi. So phi and psi are cognitively equivalent for content speakers of English. The sentences play the same role in any allowed context. Okay? That goes back to one of the initial characterization I gave for cognitive synonymy. Sameness of understanding. Okay? Now, whatever set of contexts you choose, that's going to make cognitive synonymy transitive. Because if phi 1 and phi 2 are cognitive synonyms, and phi 2 and phi 3 are cognitive synonyms, in this way of understanding the notion, well, for any allowed context, you can replace chi with phi 1 in it if and only if chi with phi 2 in it, and also chi with phi 2 in it if and only if chi with phi 3 in it. And so, by transitivity of if and only if, you get that chi with phi 1 if and only if chi with phi 3, and so also phi 1 and phi 3 are cognitive synonyms. So you get transitivity. You may say, well, maybe allow this itself context sensitive. So which are the relevant contexts is itself a matter of choice. So the choice of the relevant context is not going to be uniform. That means it depends at least on phi and psi, and maybe on more. I'll come back to this. Keep the second argument. I'll give you the third one. Cognitive entailment seems to be a non-monotonic kind of entailment. Again, that makes sense when you're after a notion which is sensitive to human cognition. So phi cognitively entails psi for one when one has something like a diffusible conditional. That would be a way to make sense of the idea. If phi, then normally psi. If phi and no funny business, then psi, in one's knowledge of belief phase. Back to an old example from good old-fashioned artificial intelligence. Tweety was a very popular bird. Everybody had Tweety back in the day. So the idea is that, for instance, actually the bird cognitively entails X flies for one. That's something like one has the conditional effect is a verb and no funny business. then X flies. It's a diffusible conditional in one's knowledge of where it plays. So supposing Tweety is a bird, one would conclude that Tweety flies. If one were to learn that Tweety is a bird, one would believe that Tweety flies, and so on. That seems good for cognitive entailment. See items 2 and 3 from the initial list that I gave you. But then, if one later learned that Tweety is a penguin, one would retract one's conclusion, right? So that's why this idea of diffusible condition makes sense for cognitive entailment. Now, that's no monotonic logic, and one may say, well, if that's a non-monotonic diffusible entailment, then you may want to apply 3 minimal principles of non-monotonic logic. So cognitive entailment would have to be cautiously monotonic, phi cognitively entails chi, phi cognitively entails psi, then phi and psi cognitively entails chi. It should satisfy cat in the sense that if phi and psi cognitively entails chi, and phi cognitively entails psi, then also phi cognitively entails chi. And it should be commutative, which makes sense. If phi and psi cognitively entail chi, also the other way around, psi and phi cognitively entail chi. These are minimal principles of non-monotonic logic. Okay? But then these imply equivalence, which is phi cognitively entail psi and the other way around, so they are cognitive synonyms, that's the first deal. Then you can replace them in the antecedent position. That's also plausible on its own, right? If two sentences are cognitive synonyms, which is this new, phi and psi are cognitive synonyms, they should play the same role in that any cognitive entailment from one should also be obtainable from the other. But understanding cognitive synonymy in this way, then you using equivalence twice, you get transitivity again. So this is another route to motivate transitivity. Okay. So it's a total mess. Still, I think that by using the setup that I tried to sell you last week, and in particular subject matters and topics, you can come up with a model for the idea of cognitive synonymy. I'm not going to model everything at once, because this is not a dialectic semantics, so cognitive synonymy will not turn out to be both transitive and intransitive at the same time. You cannot do that. But you have a semantics with a little switch. If you move the switch in that direction, you get the intransitive account. If you move the switch in the other direction, you get a transitive account. So whatever you want. Okay. Let's see how it's unfolded. So as usual, language, semantics, truth conditions, definition of logical consequence. That's how it's going to go. So the language, again, is very simple. It's a propositional language with a set of atomic formulas, PQR, negation, conjunction, disjunction. So just the truth function connectives. And the squeegee arrow for cognitive entailment. Well-defined formulas, they use the bits. So read phi squeegee arrow psi as phi cognitively entails psi for the relevant agent. So cognitive synonymy as two-way entailment is just the conjunction of the two. Okay? And we're sticking to the idea that cognitive entailment is a diffusible conditional, so that phi cognitively entails psi should be a non-monotonic operator that faces antecedent strengthening. So phi cognitively entails psi should not entail that if you add more in the antecedent, phi and psi cognitively entails psi, that follows. The logic should invalidate that. Okay. If Tweety is a bird, then Tweety flies, but if Tweety is a bird that happens also to be a penguin, then Tweety doesn't fly. And I'm going to use the same, basically, same setting that I tried to sell you last week, the topic sensitive intentional model setting with a topicality filter to model this. It's going to be a bit more complicated because now we want to account for that transitivity/intransitivity issue. Meta language, I'm going to use W, W1, W2, and so on, range of possible worlds, X, Y, Z, and so on, range of the topics or subject matters, and usual deviations in the meta language. Semantics. A frame for the language is a tuple, which is made of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. One, two, three, four, five. First item is the usual non-empty set of possible worlds. Second item is a set of accessibilities. I already exposed you to this kind of settings. Okay? Each formula of the language comes with its own binary accessibility relation between words. I flagged last week that these are indexed to formulas. Okay? So I'm allowing syntax to sneak into the semantics here. That's going to be very important because that's how we can make compositionality fail and have a non-transitive notion of cognitive synonymy, which is syntax sensitive. And I'll come back to why this makes a lot of sense. The third item is the usual non-empty set of topics. As usual, those are the subject matters assigned to formulas, what they can be about. Fourth item is the usual topic fusion operator, commutative, idempotent, associative, lumps together two topics. Always defined, as usually defined topic parted from topic fusion, and so on. And then we got finally the topic assignment function. Also, that one works in a familiar way. It assigns a subject matter to each atomic formula, and it assigns then recursively to any formula of the language as its subject matter, the fusion of the subject matters of the atoms. So, like in previous settings, what any formula of the language is about is what the atoms that show up in the formula are about, taken together. That as usual ensures the topic transparency of all of the connectives. They're all about nothing. Yeah. Again, by induction of the construction of formulas, you can show that the topic of phi is the same as the topic of style negation. Phi and not phi are about the same things. So gases in green is about what gases green is about. All stuff that I tried to motivate already in previous talks. And conjunction and disjunction, they just merge topic. So John is told anything, John is told a thing, they're about the height and looks of John. The model is a frame with an interpretation. It starts by assigning truth sets to atoms. So that just means P is true at world W. That means P is not true at world W. And again, it's completely classical and bivalent. Each atom is going to be either true or false in any world of any model, neither not true, so it's just valid semantics. And those are very classic group conditions. Negation, conjunction, disjunction work the usual way. And this is our squeegee arrow for cognitive entailment. It's just a variation on the theme operators that I gave you last week. So, why cognitive entailment psi? That's what the world, if and only if. And now we have the two component requirement. We ask for two things to happen. For phi cognitive entailment psi to come out true at the possible W, we ask for two things. The first is that psi must be true at all worlds W1, accessible by the relation indices to phi. That's what one says here. All worlds W1 accessible sub phi make true psi. Intuitively, the set of possible situations one look at in one thought, given input phi, those words are. And that's what makes a phi squeegee arrow psi a defeasible conditional-like operator. It's one that invalidates antecedent strengthening in particular. Second component, topicality inclusion. Okay. Psi must be fully on topic with respect to phi. That's the aboutness preservation component. The concepts, you may read it that way here, one needs to grasp, the latter will be enough for one to possess the concepts needed to grasp the former. Next, we impose the constraint of models. Let's call it the success constraint. So, if one W accesses via the relation indexes by phi 1 W1, then W1 will make phi true. All the words one looks at given phi are phi 1, whether phi is true. This makes sense for cognitive entailment because when you suppose that phi, for instance, to see what follows, well, to begin with, you will only look at world or circumstances where phi is true. If you were to learn phi, you would update your beliefs by kicking out words where it's not true, right? That's belief update. So that's why that condition makes a lot of sense. Logical consequence, business as usual, truth preservation at all worlds of all models, logical truth at all worlds of all models, standard normal model logic definition. Good. Now I'm going to use this notation, these brackets. It's just for the truth conditional content of phi. So this is the set of words where phi is true. what I call the theme proposition, in the past. Whereas square brackets, that's the big proposition, like the two-component account of propositional contents that I've been saying, which is made of two things: set of possible words and topic. Big proposition. Good. I also told you that those sims and also this operator can be expressed using selection functions. In this setting, each formula comes with a function, takes us into the world, spits out the set of accessible words. Okay. So the two formulations, the one using the function and the one using the relation, are equivalent, but sometimes it's easier to make a point using the function. Sometimes it's easier to make the point using the relation. And you can equivalently rephrase the truth conditions by saying the first component, you say phi cognitively entails psi, that's where the word is. If the second component is the same, but the conclusion, the first component that says all the phi selected words make true psi. So all the words you look at given phi are words where psi is true. So notice what that means if you think in terms of cognitive synonymy, which is just this one in the two directions, right? So that means given these good conditions, phi psi cognitive synonyms, exactly when A, you have that both the phi selected words make true psi, and the other way around, the psi selected words make true phi. So that means overall that all the words you look at supposing phi, or the words you look at if you learn that phi and so on, are words that make psi true and vice versa. And secondly, well, the topic of psi is included in the topic of phi, and vice versa, the topic of phi is included in the topic of psi. So just by anti-symmetry, it's the same topic. And that makes sense because cognitive synonyms are supposed to coincide in subject matter. What you think about given either, you do given the other. You might not like that intrusion in the syntax in the semantics. Some logicians who want to make don't let the syntax get in, right? Good. You may want to avoid this by indexing to thick contents instead of indexing to comments. So you can have a restriction and say, oh, let's only look at models that satisfy, let's say, syntax insensitivity. If phi and psi get the same thick proposition, then the accessibility relations for them will be the same. Okay. And that filters out the syntax sensitivity. Because now content identical sentences can be substituted in particular antecedents. So if phi and psi get the same thick content, also phi squiggy arrow chi and psi squiggy arrow chi get the same content, thick content. Another way is to use comparative similarity. So you have a total ordering of all the possible words by similarity. Okay, that's the usual Lewis, Steinmacher, and others setting used to do counterfactual truth conditions for counterfactual conditional logic. So you add to the model a ternary relation, and you say that world W1 is at least similar to world W as world W2. That's going to be reflexive and transitive, and then you get that phi squid arrow psi is what the world, just in case the minimal 5 worlds are also psi worlds, and you also have the topicality constraint on top of that. On this approach, cosmos monotonicity, cut commutativity come out valid, and now you got a transitive notion. So, what's valid and what's invalid in this setting captures all that we wanted. So the success conditions guarantees that synonymy is reflexive and symmetric. So these are two validities. Okay. That's good, because that shows that this is a similarity relation. Nice. You want it not to be transitive. The basic setting invalidates two-way transitivity. So you can have that P and Q are cognitive synonyms, Q and R are cognitive synonyms, but it doesn't follow that P and R are cognitive synonyms. So that's indeed an intransitive notion according to the logic. Okay. So John Cleese, that Parrot sequence is nicely modeled here. We have non-monotonicity and simplification features, so it behaves nicely as a non-monotonic notion. P cognitively entails R, doesn't follow that P and Q cognitively entails R. It's not even completely monotonic. I think that's not complicated. The important point is that this is a kind of catalyst variable, so diffeasible conditional. Okay. If it's a bird, it flies. If it's a penguin bird, it flies, it doesn't follow. Okay, simplification. Oh, so yeah, simplification is important. If phi cognitively entails psi and chi, it also entails one of the two conjuncts. That was the other. Commutativity of conjunction at the meta level, that's not very important. This is important. Antecedent substitution phi and psi, psi and chi, same peak content, same peak position. It doesn't entail that phi and psi cognitively entails chi and psi and phi cognitively entails chi. They get the same peak content. And that's a failure of compositionality in line with Hannes Leibniz's impossibility results. The content of phi cognitively entails chi is not just determined by the connective and the thick contents assigned to phi and chi. Again, perfectly in line with Leibniz's impossibility result, we have non-compositionality in this sense. P and P prime may be cognitive synonyms, Q and Q prime may be cognitive synonyms. It doesn't follow that P and Q, P prime and Q prime are cognitive synonyms. That's exactly a failure of compositionality. And finally, as desired, again, the absorption principles that we didn't like, those were the ones that doomed first degree attainment failed. Phi cognitively entails P cognitively entails Q. It doesn't follow that P cognitively entails Q and further stuff. Okay, that's the topic filter doing the job. Disjunction interaction phase in the sense phi cognitively entails psi does not entail phi cognitively entails psi and blah blah disjunction. And so again, the topic filter does the job. Okay, conclusion. How to look at it? Our model gives evidence that there is a coherent notion of cognitive synonymy because we have a model for it. So it's coherent already. It's even consistent. Delivering the expected validities and invalidities and vindicating intuitions for intransitivity. But the non-transitive notion is not very stable in a precise sense. So you may take one of the two stances. You may think, yeah, there must be a transitive notion here. So you stick to transitivity. We saw three arguments for it, actually took you through two. One based on substitution subjectivity, cognitive role, that's one I see, and no monotonic reasoning. And the semantics throws light on what's going on. If we use comparative similarities, you add the total ordering of similarity ordering all the possible words, then you get a transitive cognitive synonymy. Because when you add similarity, you have a uniform structure to interpret cognitive entailment more than a plain selection function without further constraints. In the former, it's always the minimal words that are selected. So the words you look at given phi are always the minimal, the closest words where phi is. In the latter, there's no constraint, only the success constraint that I impose. There can be any kind of words. But semantics is still the selection function tradition also have a uniformity condition. That's one that I already flagged last week. When all the phi selected words make true psi, and all the psi selected words make true phi, then the phi selected and psi selected words are the same. Okay. So intuitively, if all the words you look at, supposing phi, are psi words and vice versa, all the words you look at, supposing psi, are phi words, then the phi selected words are the same as the psi selected words. The usual motivation for having that is that it entails equivalence. So if phi and psi are cognitive synonyms and phi cognitively entails chi, you can replace phi with psi, and it follows that also psi cognitively entails chi. So uniformity with success entails syntax insensitivity, and that's gonna make cognitive synonymy transitive, because two-way transitivity is validated. Of course, if you go this way, you have to say something on the intuition that's behind that Parrot sequences. You have to explain them away somehow. You have to say, looks like it's intransitive, but it's really not what's going on. Here's a conjecture. It may be empirically testable, perhaps. We're not going to test it because I don't launch it in most books. I can't do experiments. But if somebody who has goodwill and he's able to do experiments. That's the way to test it. Maybe that's what's going on in that dead Parrot series. Phi 1, Phi 2, and so on. What's going on is that instead of cognitive synonymy, one is only after one-way cognitive entailments from Phi 1 to Phi 2 to blah, 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 and down to Phi n. Maybe there's an explanation for that in our cognitive architecture, because after all, we pass the syntax of sentences sequentially, right? Like when you read a novel or you listen to somebody talking. First sentence, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one, and the next one. And in a dead Parrot sequence, one may just move forward following the flow of syntax. So you hear John Cleese saying the first thing, and then the second, and the third, and so on. And each item you find obviously is the successor, but you don't check the reverse entailment because you're busy following the flow. So maybe that's what's going on. But then the problem remains, because even when you assume uniformity, cognitive entailment still fails transitivity. So the agent can still consistently fail to be on top of all the transitive closure of that Parrot series. So even when you add uniformity, cognitive synonymy is transitive, but cognitive entailment is not. Okay. So P cognitively entails Q, Q cognitively entails R. It doesn't follow that P cognitively entails R in the logic. Or you may go the other way around and say, no, that Parrot sequence must be taken at face value. And so we should reject transitivity for cognitive synonymy. It's just a similarity relation, actually. Then you have to explain how to resist the transitivity arguments that we gave you. Some ideas. Why is it that the formal semantics can violate equivalence, even though it's supposedly so fundamental? The various relations of functions are indexed to formulas. I mentioned that several times. Now, without uniformity, that makes, therefore, cognitive entailment and cognitive synonymy sensitive to syntax in some sense. And in this setting, you have that even P, in spite of obviously coinciding in subject matter, they're both about whatever P is about, and to set, that we have the same possible words, of course, they can differ cognitively, because the functions of P and the functions with sub P and P, they can select different words, because there's no constraint on how they work. They can pick out any set of words. They're very anarchic. So maybe what goes on in a dead Parrot series, if you want to take those dead Parrot series at face value, is that adjacent items are indeed cognitive synonyms for the agent, but distant items indeed are not. That was the initial intuition. But then the agent is sensitive to the syntax. Okay, compatibly again with Hannes's impossibility result, the relevant contents fail obvious compositionality tests for the agents. For some sentence P involved in a dead Parrot sequence or so, it may be that the agent treats it differently from P and P. So the agent just not able to parse the syntax for some reason. For medieval context sensitivity, cognitive entailment and cognitive synonymy as being judged relative to a knowledge base of a particular agent or generic biologist or common knowledge provided by context. Why biology? Because we have an example with cognitive synonyms for biologists. I don't remember. It was woodchucks and something else. What are those animals which are the same as woodchucks but have a different name? Native English speaker. Woodchucks and groundhogs? Could that be? What native English speaker are you? I think it's groundhogs are mammals, woodchucks are mammal. They are cognitive synonyms for most competent biologists. Okay, they were not for me until I learned that it's the same species. Okay. That was the example. Good. Context sensitivity may keep the spirit of the substitution salva veritate and cognitive law principles without giving them the strength to imply transitivity. Context sensitivity matches our semantics in its generality without uniformity. Take a word as involving a pair of possible cognitive state of the agent and the context with respect to which cognitive synonymy is assessed. Then even if finding silent truth, they have truth set and the same topic. At W, the psi-selected words may differ for one who has not processed their equivalence yet. Yeah, I will skip this thing because I'm out of time, and I will just stop and wrap up. Well, the slides that I skipped, I have to do with the fact, you may have spotted that. Looks like vagueness, right? So that Parrot looks like vagueness. So there are some treatments of vagueness that you conjecture you can apply to deal with that Parrot sequence. That was the slides that I skipped. Wrapping up, cognitive synonymy is important but elusive, difficult to model, and seemingly shaped by conflicting intuitions, but we have provided the model for it, which captures the intuitions. Conflict remains, of course, between demands for and against sensitivity, but our model can accommodate either by tweaking a single parameter. You add uniformity, you get sensitivity. You take it away, you don't get sensitivity. Besides, the model can explain both by grounding the former in the uniformity of stability and stability of our cognitive apparatus. Okay, that's why it's called uniformity. Okay? It's just a way of regimenting those functions. And the latter in the sensitivity to context and syntax. Okay, that's what I have to say. I'm gonna stop. Thanks. 10-minute break.
But very much.
Break, yeah. Yeah.
It's American as each other. An American what? Not all of this. Yeah, how much over the truck pictures now? How much ground with a ground salt off at the ground off the ground, right? You made that one out? Yeah.
Que Miguel Ángel se va de eso y al final no tenemos mucha existencia, pero
Yeah, groundhogs have whoops. Yeah, no, that.
No, so my first groundhog when I was in America, they're in Europe. I don't think it's a European, but I think it's an American coming from American.
Oh, okay.
Yo no sé.
So the Americans may be more familiar with the
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that it's like the woods. It's very American. Yeah.
Porque el contexto le gustó mucho
It's called by its very well, exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's American. Exactly. The prairie. The prairie. The house on the prairie. Exactly.
Pero ¿por qué no tengo no, porque cuando nos cruzaba con este, entonces no vimos todos los textos que prometimos. Vimos solo la mitad. Y pues bueno, entonces estaré teniendo por tus chicos. Sí, yo creo que ya este año no mandamos ningún email, sino más bien en enero. Y empezaría en febrero. Entonces en enero les estamos contactando a ver si hay buenas. Entonces ya lo sí, la idea de Miguel Ángel era ir variando el formato. Entonces esta vez fue solo una lectura, nadie recibe simplemente la porque él estaba haciendo temas y yo también pues algo que yo le notaba. Me querían como atraer la que racionalidad le iba a interesar. Sí. Por eso la propusimos.
Hi, Franz.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I got completely distracted when you explained uniformity. Could you
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
that was very complicated because there are different ways to play.
Oh, yeah. Pero vamos a ver qué dice se va o no. No sé si va a estar en la ciudad, no sé si se va a otro lado. A cualquier caso, en enero les vamos a escribir para decirles qué pasa con los y preguntar. Un poco de esto, pero Porque todos publicaron muchos artículos.
Okay, this is the uniformity condition. It says, if all the worlds you look at given phi, the phi selected worlds will have psi and vice versa. If all the worlds you look at given psi, right? Then it's the same selection function. You can impose this as a constraint on your models. So you can say, I'm only going to look at models that satisfy this. Or a more straightforward way is you just impose a total and there is nothing to work. That's something that if you impose that the worlds are totally ordered, which world you assign a program? So you take a world, you just standard use. This one is automatically when you get to this,
Yeah, I guess, can you explain to me how you don't go will you abandon? Because I thought if the topics are the same,
so this ways, I don't know. It's that was the most complicated page in the whole paper. It's a one page.
Let me tell you why it's about it. I was thinking, if the topic of this two is the same, the topic of this
Yes, that's right.
I instead of one, so the 7 more people.
It's not going to be the same. Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you
What makes that fade? That the second one is
okay, and why did like example where so I mean, you don't have to be the case that one instance that you as a different set of world that the other. Because otherwise. Without some context dependence or
Sí, yo creo que está en el público, generalmente los es muy difícil que los acepten si no los acepten. Yo creo que hay presentaciones que sí, bueno, que deberían ir al seminario de programa.
Pero después de eso,
Pero nadie sabe, o sea, no es que no quiera, pero la idea de lo que tiene con la es que se quiere dar también una buena tienes que poder
You haven't said anything about or
Yeah, right. That makes sense. So it makes it easy there.
Pues a los que no son relevantes, o sea, no utilizas, no todas las variables que aparecen las utilizas de efectivos niveles para poder hacer distribución. Entonces,
It needs to be this one because all the world's access and it makes to be other one because there's so few accessibility centers to get started.
pero si quieres ver la teoría,
It makes it two-way. And the same for
is lack of uniformity what allows for PMQ to have different accessibility relations?
Yeah, that's the reason why investors go into according to it's like that this world these is an artist it's not the
But then P1R or not, how you do yeah, if there are differential values.
Yeah, what is value is
Okay, is it proof in the book?
no, it's a paper.
Okay.
It's beautiful to see how
Okay, I'll look at it. I was worried that I was missing something like simple, but if it's that complicated, then I don't think I'm there.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so we have not very long, about half an hour for our Q&A, and we're starting with Axel.
I'm starting again. Okay. Thank you again. This is great. So I'm gonna try a hand at your 10, which is like how to resist the arguments for transitivity, right? Something. Yeah. Especially the first argument, because the first argument, it's not surprising that it's an argument about transitivity, because the Poianian condition of substitution salva veritate is an if and if, right? So inherits the transitivity from if and if.
Yeah.
So that seems kind of question begging for the defender of transitivity. And so what we need is something similar, or like a notion of substitutivity that is no longer salva veritate, but salva something that could be gradual enough that we could talk about similarity, right? Yeah. So we would need something like, instead of if and if I don't leave, something like I don't know. That's a good question. Like the acceptability of the acceptability of one, or something more cognitive, so that we could have something that is not transitive there, but it's still something.
So I don't think that's question begging, because the relevant if here, it's not going to be cognitive synonymy. It's going to be whatever biconditional you use in the argument, which is going to be transitive. So it doesn't need to be a diffeasible biconditional cognitive, but cognitively sensible biconditional. It can just be bi-entailment or whatever you like. So that's not, when I write it on a list, this thing is whatever biconditional.
It's the EFF between Shippy and Shift. The one that one.
Yeah, same thing.
That one.
Yeah, that's gonna be whatever biconditional you want to define. It's not gonna be.
No, but what I mean is that if that biconditional is transitive, then you're gonna get automatically transitivity. If instead of having an if and only if, there you have another operation that doesn't define an equivalence class, then you're not going to have transitivity.
Right.
So that is why.
But I mean, surely you could call it whatever you want. Surely you can have one that satisfies transitivity. Nobody can live without a transitive biconditional conditional. It may not be the if of ordinary language, but it can be entailment or bi-entailment or whatever you like.
Okay.
I even have it in the language because I have conjunction and negation, and I can define the material conditional and have the material biconditional out of that. And that's going to be transitive. I agree that you may not want that to be the meaning of if. No, I even agree, but
no. What I mean is that then substitution. What that shows is just like, if this is what substitutions are, that substitutions are veritate, of course, is transitive. When you need to question is their link between cognitive synonymy and substitution salva veritate, and the best way of doing that is by offering us close enough notion of substitution that is not salva veritate, that doesn't have the if and only if there, that can capture the reason why we think cognitively synonymous expressions are substitutable salva veritate, but doesn't entail transitivity. Is this a better way of? Because I am playing the role of somebody who's trying to defend that cognitive synonymy is not transitive, and I'm responding to this argument, right? Yeah. So when I say like, oh yeah, of course that if we understand cognitive synonymy as substitution salva veritate, we're gonna get transitivity because of the reason you say, and that should not be surprising because substitution salva veritate is an equivalence relation, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to challenge that link by saying, well, no, because what seems to be substitution salva veritate, like cognitive synonym expressions, are not really cognitive substitution salva veritate. They are substitutions because truth is just binary, and what we need is substitution salva something else that is loose enough, that is not going to define an equivalent relation. It's going to be something that is not transitive, like the acceptability of phi if only, or something like it's acceptable that if she phi, then she phi, and it's acceptable to the previous one, and then you use all the machinery that you've already developed to, once you disentangle those conditionals, you're going to get something that is not transitive.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say because the dialectic is subtle here.
Yeah, I know.
The thing is that when we saw this as a reason for transitivity, we did appear to coin substitutivity salvability, but there's a crucial difference with respect to the standard way of understanding that is that we can restrict to a loud context.
But
Yeah,
but
I mean,
Use-
if that's a reply that you have in mind,
no,
then that's fine. No,
no.
then I'm not sure. Yeah, I think the dialectic something you escapes you. No.
Okay.
So I don't know
I
what to
can
say.
try writing and sending it to you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Ricardo, please.
Yes. So this question is just to help me understand a bit better the point of the impossibility proof.
Right.
So you started with a very useful and informal characterization of cognitive synonym. You told us, P and Q are cognitive synonyms if they play the same role in our cognitive life. And if that notion is coherent, it seems like the following notion should also be coherent. P and Q have similar meanings if and only if they play the same role in most of our cognitive life. Meaning that there may be some obscure instance where substitution fails.
Yeah.
Maybe with something like wishes or can explain or whatever. Well, so if this notion is coherent, so what's the deal with the impossibility proof?
Yeah, right. I mean, the impossibility proof by Hannes just aims to show that you cannot have all of those taken together. And I suspect that that kind of notion that you saw with me as coherent, if the other one is, would be one that doesn't satisfy convolutionality. And if it doesn't, of course, then you reject that one, and the Hannes proof doesn't go through anymore.
Okay.
That's already the case in the account without transitivity directly close to you. That's why I flagged that at some point in the talk. So if in the version of the account that we have, in which cognitive synonymy is intransitive, it's also not compositional, and that's how it escapes inconsistency because it doesn't satisfy that condition.
Okay.
And it kind of makes sense because it's gonna fail compositionality, and that goes together with syntax sensitivity for the agent. The agent is sensitive to the syntax in some sense, and that's how it can fail compositionality. That's kind of so I'm not objecting to that. The point of the proof by Hannes is just to show that you cannot have all of these together.
Okay.
But in the non-transitive account that I proposed to you, that one fails, and so the account is consistent for that reason.
So if it fails compositionality, like if this notion fails compositionality, the only explanation is that then it's syntax sensitive. Because I was thinking to say, look, this notion fails compositionality is very messy, but it still can be used to deal with that Parrot example.
Good.
But if you say that means that you have a syntax sensitive account, that worries me. I just wonder if there is another possibility that rather than accepting
it could be
syntax sensitive.
that's why I said we don't have the experiments and stuff, but so the idea is find psi cognitive synonyms for you, but not find psi not cognitive synonyms for you, let's say. Okay. It seems that you're sensitive to the syntax in the sense that when a negation is added, what was a cognitive synonym for you is not a cognitive synonym anymore. So one explanation would be that you're failing to process the syntax properly to retrieve the contents. And say for this one, right? These are cognitive synonyms for you, these are cognitive synonyms for you. But when you conjoin the conjunctions, the relevant conjunctions are not. It seems that you are sensitive to the mode of composition. When you process the syntax, you miss something. But
what if the only failure of substitution is, let's say, in the following case, like for Ricardo, it's easier to explain what it is for a parrot to be dead than it is to explain when a parrot is no more.
Yeah.
And suppose that's that. In any other case, they play the same role in, in my cognitive life. Is that
good?
Does that show a failure of composition?
Good. I don't know. I'm not sure. That's a good point. That's point taken, because it may be that you can explain that without necessarily resorting to syntax sensitivity.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Thanks.
Oh, there's a question from Axel.
Again?
Again, yeah, well, except if someone else. Okay, Esteban has a question for that.
So this is a very down-to-earth question. For the typical roles that cognitive significance is usually thought to be required, let's say, think about Freudian cases that you talked about in your first session, or like Kripke's, Paderewski's case, or Pierre's case. But does this account make any difference for how we think about those concrete examples? Or
good.
You know, or whether, for instance, Kripke's examples are different in some respect from Freudian's, etc. Those kind of questions. Yes.
Pierre cases, I don't know. That's still messy. If the Kripke diagnosis is right, that shows that we have inconsistent procedures for ascribing propositional attitudes, blah blah blah. But this is consistent, so Frege cases. So if you have in mind that notion that Frege calls cognitive equipollence at some point, that's ruled out by this account, the single Piper. And I think we got it right. And sorry, big man, but Frege got it wrong. Sorry, Frege, but he got it wrong. So Frege says something like, so P and Q are cognitive synonyms when one cannot rationally take either as true and the other as false. They still can fail to be cognitive synonyms for us, because for me, 2 + 2 = 4, and all equilateral triangles are equiangular, are not cognitive synonyms. But surely you cannot rationally fail to take either as true or the other one as false. So Frege gets it wrong because his account of equipollence is not sensitive to subject matters, which ours is. And I think we are right, and he was wrong.
I have a general question about why explain cognitive synonymy taking sentences.
Right, good.
And I was thinking about these old examples where you get differences in cognitive significance with different tokens of the same sentence type.
No.
And think about John Perry's case, in which you are in a room and you look through 2 different windows. And then you can have cases in which you say this, pointing to a chip or a cursor, is the same as this. So that can be trivial for you in some cases, or not trivial for you if the 2 windows are separate. So all these people working on indexicality use these kinds of examples to say, look, these problems are not just attached to sentence types, but you can have 2 tokens of the very same sentence type that differ in cognitive significance. So then the question is, how do you generalize to these cases, or whether you would take this move to be just too fine-grained and you don't want to deal with that?
Good, that's very good. So we only wanted to say that it's got sentence type that's fine.
Yeah, that's why.
Relevant. Yeah, that's why we added that. I don't know what. So are all of these are cases that involve indexicals?
Yeah, exactly. What they do is just basically they take this idea from Kaplan, in which he explains cognitive significance in terms of characters.
Yeah.
And then what they try to do is to just keep the character fixed.
Yeah.
And generate differences in cognitive value.
Yeah.
And then some people in California, they saw, well, that's what Ken Taylor called Heracliteanism about content. Because you end up having too fine-grained to capture all these things.
Got it.
And then the argument goes saying, look, but it's the very same phenomenon. There is no good reason to think that that's a separate phenomenon. So that's why.
Got it. Yeah. Don't know what to say, but the reason is that, and that's also why we only dealt with sentential synonymy. We didn't get into account of synonymy and substitution of the subsentential components of sentences. Because, hey, subject matter semantics is only well developed for sentences and sentential languages, as you've seen also in the previous talks that I've given. And so we don't even know, there's not even agreement on an account of subject matter in general for subsentential components of sentences like names or designators and predicates. So we're very far away from having an account of subject matters for indexicals. So I don't know what to say because subject matter theory is just not there yet. But yeah, I totally understand how that's going to work. But I don't know how that's going to, those phenomena are going to relate to a treatment of subject matter because it's so very underdeveloped and it's about the subsentential components of sentences.
Then just a small, maybe more qualificatory question. But again, in late Gibbs proof, well, the Hammes proof.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. No, the previous. Okay. But isn't non-triviality just in obvious contradiction with compositionality? Because if not, tautology can be similar to a contradiction, then phi and its negation cannot be.
Yeah, that's how the proof works. But actually,
okay.
You need connectedness because so non-triviality and connectedness together means that you have a long sequence and you can keep shortening it. Shorten until you get that the first one is similar with the last one, which is what is ruled out by non-triviality.
Perfect.
So you have by stipulation, connectedness allows you to have a very long chain where the first item is a contradiction and the last item is a tautology. And the other assumptions allow you to shorten the sequence unless you end up claiming that a tautology is similar to a contradiction. That's how the proof works essentially.
No, wait. Can you go back to
use closure to get a tautology and a contradiction. Use connectedness to find a sequence where the first item is the tautology and the last item is a contradiction. Now, when you use similarity, closure, and compositionality, it proves a lemma, which is a bit complicated. And that shows that given any sequence, you can find a shorter one where, so phi 1 prime, blah, 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 where phi k in the middle is logically equivalent to phi prime k for the case here. And you apply that repeatedly, and you can shorten the original long sequence into one of line 2. So you get like a tautology similar to contradictions with nothing in the middle, and that's against non-triviality. So that's how the contradiction pops up.
Can you return to the formulation of compositionality?
Yeah.
Okay.
The one that people don't like usually is connected.
Yes. Yeah. But I'm worried about compositionality, right?
Yeah.
Because it seems
I agree, but that's why I think that if one has to go, it's that one. Yeah, I think.
Of course. I mean, no, my question is why is it obvious that is the one that has to go? Because the motivation.
I mean, what's obvious for you is let's have some Hannes. So at the end of the proof, Hannes says, well, maybe we need to change our views of compositionality, but it took him a proof to get that.
But again, what is because when you already presented the motivation for non-triviality, you said like, oh, it's because we don't want everything to be about the same thing, right?
You trivialize similarity.
You trivialize similarity.
If a contradiction is meaning similar.
Yeah, that I still see a hole in the middle of why you think that why do you think the motivation for non-triviality, besides it calling non-triviality, is that it would trivialize the
Yeah, I mean, even in my non-classical hyperintentional account of content, a contradiction and a tautology are going to have supremely different root conditions, right?
Yes.
And so, if that doesn't make for dissimilarity, I don't know what will.
So yeah, it's like it's such an extreme case, but there's nothing special about those two, right? So it could have been another notion of triviality. There has to be at least two propositions that don't have the same content. Good.
The quick answer, that's good, because people don't like connectedness, but the answer is that one, because if that was not a connected relation, then you can have finds which are entirely unrelated in that no chain of association could ever link the two.
Yes.
And that would sound bad because it makes for a disunified language. And anyway, you can focus on the connected subspaces and you run the argument again. It's okay, take the fragment of the language which is connected, and then you run the argument for that one. And that so for each other fragments.
Good. But okay, so then what is the motivation for connectedness? Because you said this has something to do with you don't want the language to be like,
you have a language such that some sentences are, it doesn't make sense to say that some of its sentences are meaning similar or meaning dissimilar to some other of its sentences. So it looks like a heavily disunified language. You may say that's fine, but then you can still run the argument for the fragments of the language which are connected. Okay, and you can run the argument for each one of them.
But connectedness is only about similarity, not about non-similarity, because then you could say like, well, no, those that are isolated that you cannot get from any link,
well,
and they are non-similar.
Not quite, because when there is no link, you cannot say that they are similar, and you cannot say that they are dissimilar. There's just no similarity relation between them. So they are dissimilar only vaguely.
Yes, but there is no notion of dissimilarity here, right? You don't have no conditions for when things are not similar.
Well, you can call this, as you wish, you can call dissimilar sentences when they're not linked by a similarity chain, or you can call them dissimilar when the similarity chain that links them is very long. How long? Well, that depends. It's vague. It's that similarity.
Yeah, but I will not insist. But thank you.
Okay, Ricardo.
Yeah, so as you know, I'm a bit confused about failures of uniformity. So one motivation for failure of uniformity would be that then cognitive synonymy is not transitive. I mean, that's a motivation depending on what you stand, but
yeah, right.
Can you think of an independent motivation for failures of uniformity? The thing is that, honestly, I'm even having trouble thinking of a pair of English sentences relative to which makes sense to deny uniformity. It may be just because I'm not understanding the notion very well. But
okay. So cognitive entailment from pi to psi. Okay. When the models into which you interpret these don't satisfy uniformity, then there are models in which. So remember the proposed intuitive reading is supposing phi, you would conclude that psi. If you were to learn that phi, you would come to believe that psi, and so on. Okay. So the models into which you don't interpret that don't satisfy uniformity. That means that there are going to be selection functions that come with the antecedent, which behave in a very weird way. So, supposing P at a certain world, you will look at a bunch of worlds, the worlds which are possible given your supposition in life. And supposing P and P, you're going to look at the different parts of the world, so they're going to be different. Okay. So, supposing I'm happy, that makes me look at a bunch of possible worlds. Suppose that I'm happy and I'm unhappy, I may look at a different world. It's crazy, but that's just because it's anarchic. That it's anarchic how the thing works. And you may say that in some cases that may happen, again, because you're syntax sensitive. So this could be a long and complicated sentence. Right? It could be PM, 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 P. And because I'm unable to process the syntax, because it's a very long conjunction, okay, so I can't extract the content from the syntax, I look at a bunch of different words. From the words I look at when given only P. I tell you, oh, if I'm happy, then I'm going to drink wine. If I'm happy and happy and I'm happy and I'm happy and I'm happy, happy, I'm going to drink wine. And you're able to follow the syntax in the first case, but not in the second, because I have too many conjunctions together. You can multiply the conjunctions if you like. At some point, we will lose track. Or take any other case of that. So that's why we went for the idea that it's syntax sensitivity that can take the whole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But in general, there are so uniformity is just a common condition which people add into the semantics of ceteris paribus conditionals, a la Lewis-Tanaka or counterfactors. So the stronger Lewis-Tanaka logic has uniformity already because it has a total ordering of similarity. Okay. But there are weaker counterfactual logics or conditional logics in which it doesn't hold. It gives you a weaker counterfactual conditional or a weaker ceteris paribus conditional, but there's logics out there. There's even textbooks. If you look the Priest Intro to Non-Classical Logic has a bunch of Greek counterfactual logics or conditional logics in which uniformity doesn't hold. It's an argument in the sense that you don't order the worlds by similarity, for instance. Okay? So there's no total order. So you don't automatically, when you evaluate the counterfactual, so then it will be the predicate that fine and it will be psi. You look at a bunch of selected worlds where phi is true, but they're not the most similar world where phi is true. There are a bunch of worlds where phi is true, but otherwise the selection is random. And then you get a counterfactual with a weak logic. You may say, well, but that's the strange notion of counterfactual because Lewis and Tanaka were right when they said you only look at the closest and most similar world. But it's out there.
Right, that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I have two questions about quantification.
Wait, which quantification?
Let me tell you.
Yeah.
The first one is here on this first slide.
Yeah.
Because this formulation of non-triviality is too strong for me.
Oh, okay.
Because strictly speaking, for non-triviality, you require only that there is at least there is a one tautology that is or cannot be similar.
That's right.
Okay.
I agree.
That should be enough for non-triviality.
That's right.
My question is, if there is something in the group that requires
No.
the universal justification.
You only need some.
Okay.
I think Hannes went for any because he thought that this is a plausible principle, but you only need the weaker one that you were thinking about for the plausibility.
And I was thinking on that because I know that the automatic thought here is that tautology means tautology in classical logic, but I was thinking Abelian logic where you have phi implies phi and also the negation of that, and they are similar, and then weird things happen with tautologies and contradictions, and that brought me to the whole that.
That's weird, right? Yeah, I would say that's weird. Those are including assumptions. So
For you.
Not for me, even for me, that's weird. Yeah.
Okay, and the second question is about slide 34, I think.
Oh, okay. Let's get the I'll take a one.
The conjecture. Yes, there you replaced
every occurrence of the similarity relation with entailments. But again, strictly speaking, you only need that one of those is an entailment, right? In order to make the non-transitive payment.
Not for say it again.
Pardon?
Say it again.
Yes, you say there, here's a conjecture.
So the setup is a dead Parrot series in which
Yeah.
this one cognitive link is the next one, which cognitive link is the next one, which cognitive link is the next one. And so on.
What I want to say is that in order for the transitivist to explain the intuition, is merely say, look, most of them can be actually similarities. You only need one, at least one entailment. So there is no need to replace every occurrence of the similarity by entailments. As maybe I was distracted by your formulation at the end of that paragraph that you put only entailments, but you only need one.
Yeah, you only need one. That's right. Yeah, because that would be enough. Yeah, I think that's fine. Very good. Yes. It may be that the guy doesn't manage to pass one.
Okay.
And that.
Well, thanks a lot, Franz.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I wanted just to to thank you again for spending 3 weeks with us, because it's complicated to put everything on hold to go abroad, and this is like part of what makes sense of these lectures, the fact that we not only have you here for a one day or a conference, but that we have the opportunity to actually discuss with you for several days in a row and get to know each other, because we hope this is actually the beginning of ongoing collaboration, both between our department staff, but also with our students who have come to see you in the afternoon. That was also very generous of you to save your afternoon to discuss like ongoing work. So it was very gratifying I learned a lot for my part, and I think everybody enjoyed a very good philosophical challenge that you presented to us. So
I have managed. I would have stayed around for longer if I managed, but I'm head of department now, and I'm also editor of the Philosophical Quarterly, which means looking at dozens of papers every week. And so, I couldn't be here for longer. Otherwise, I would have been happy to be here. And being here for 3 weeks, it's been like breathing fresh air. And I go back to paperwork and meetings and bureaucracy and that kind of stuff. So, you've been fresh air for me. Thanks.